Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Charts with Dan as we kick off this Thanksgiving week. I hope you're having a good start to your holiday week. As expected, Wicked for Good absolutely dominated the box office this past weekend, so let's jump right into the numbers. And the number one movie was, of course, Wicked for Good, which came in at a final of $147 million. That was just a little below projections on Sunday, a little bit more than studios will often miss on movies, but when you get to numbers this big, there's a little bit more room for variance. We'll dive more into those numbers in just a minute. Now You See Me, Now You Don't took a 57.4% drop in its second weekend to bring in $8.9 million. There's just not a whole lot of room for anything else, so there wasn't this past weekend anything else other than Wicked. Its total is now at $36.6 million. Predator Badlands had a better hold in its third week. It dropped 48.5% to bring in $6.5 million. Its domestic total now at 76.5. It's still trying to crawl its way to $100 million, and with the holiday week, I think that it's still a possibility. The Running Man took a big drop in weekend number 2. It dropped 65.3% for a $5.7 million weekend. It's at $26.9 million, and there's not really anything it can do to pull itself out of the bad opening weekend. It got off on a bad foot. Rental Family entered theaters at number 5 at $3.3 million. The, I think, award hopeful for Brendan Fraser got off to an okay start, but it's going to need to expand its audience over the next week. At number 6 was Sisu Road to Revenge, which brought in $2.4 million. After the first movie was so well received, they really put a lot into the launch of this movie, and, that's an okay result, but I think maybe they might have wanted a bit more there. Regretting You sticks around the top 10 in its fifth weekend with a 57.5% drop. It brought in $1.5 million. Nuremberg is at number 8 with a 50% drop in its third weekend. Black Phone 2 hangs around the top 10 for at least one more weekend, bringing in just over $1 million. And Sarah's Oil rounds out the top 10 with $800,000. This really was a weekend of the haves and have-nots. Wicked for Good had most of the box office, and the rest of the movies really had not the rest of the money. So let's talk about the opening of Wicked for Good. There was a question, including one that was raised on this show, about whether this was going to be the top domestic opening weekend of the year. It fell about $15 million short of a Minecraft movie, which opened to $162.7 million. Wicked for Good is the second best opening of the year domestically, just ahead of Lilo and Stitch, but still pretty good, especially when you consider the fact that the movie was budgeted at around reportedly $350 to $375 million, but that was for both parts. So Universal essentially got a 2-for-1 deal. Now, of course, there is marketing spend that has to be spent on both movies, but I think they're going to be clearly profitable on this film. So it was a risky move to break it into two movies, because if the first one didn't do well, then the second one probably wouldn't do well either. But what they're going to have here are two bona fide hits made on the production budget of one mega movie. So a calculated risk that's paid off for Universal. Last week, I asked members here on the channel whether they thought that Wicked would beat a Minecraft movie to become the highest domestic opening film of the year, and 43% of you said yes, and it honestly wasn't that far off, but 57% of you correctly said that no, it would not be the highest domestic opening of the year, and you really have to look at the rest of the schedule and wonder if anything will beat a Minecraft movie, especially because Christmas movies tend to be a little more backloaded than front-loaded. These are the highest grossing opening weekends for musicals, and it was actually more difficult than I anticipated to separate out what's a musical and what's not a musical. Ultimately, I decided to go with a definition that has characters breaking into song throughout the film. So a movie like Barbie that has a big musical sequence is not necessarily a musical. I think the biggest in-between case was 2016's The Jungle Book, which is not on this list. If you wanted it to be on this list, just slot it in your head in the top 10. So The Lion King is the highest opening musical of all time at $191.7 million. That's the 2019 remake. Beauty and the Beast is second at $174.7 million. That's also the live-action remake from 2017. But Wicked for Good has the third best opening ever for a musical at $147 million. It comes in about $8 million million ahead of Moana 2 from last year, although that movie opened on a Wednesday. Had it opened on Friday, I think it would be higher than Wicked for Good and potentially some other movies on this list. Then we have the original Wicked, which came out last year, in sixth place at $112.5 million. 2023's The Little Mermaid at $95.5 million. Aladdin 2019 at $91.5 million. The Lorax, which was listed as a musical everywhere that I checked, comes in at number 9 at $70.2 million. And then we have the original Moana at number 10 at $56.6 million, although like its sequel, it also opened on a Wednesday. So looking at this list, you have 4 Disney live-action remakes, 2 Moana films, a Frozen movie, 2 Wicked movies, and the Lorax. Disney absolutely dominating this chart. And forget opening weekends for a movie adapted from a Broadway musical. Wicked for Good easily took number 1 there. It's already the 6th highest grossing Broadway adaptation of all time at $147 million. It is just behind Les Miserables and The Sound of Music and Chicago and Grease. It's going to pass all of those movies by next weekend, probably by Thanksgiving. It will be the 2nd highest grossing movie adapted from a Broadway musical after the first Wicked, and then we'll see how it legs out from there. So both Wicked movies destined to be number 1 as far as movies adapted originally from Broadway musicals. Let's turn to some other movies that are in the top 10. Now You See Me, Now You Don't is about $30 million behind Now You See Me 2 on that franchise list, and we'll see how it does over this holiday week to see if it can get up into that number 2 spot. Of course, that's unadjusted for inflation. Predator Badlands is now less than $4 million away from becoming the highest grossing film in the Predator franchise domestically. Only Alien vs. Predator stands in the movie's way. However, when you do adjust that for inflation, Predator Badlands is now at number 4. It's right behind Predators, so it's going to be number 3 on this list, but that's where it's going to stop. It is not going to get up above Alien vs. Predator or the original Predator, which is at number 1 adjusted for inflation at $170.3 million. This is what I like to call our road to recovery, which for the first time in a couple of months actually looks like a road to recovery. The blue line is the box office weekend average for 2015 to 2019. The red line is the average from 2021 to 2024. And the dotted black line is every weekend this year. And you can see that for the first time in a while, we were above the post-pandemic average, which would be the red line. And we were very close to hitting the average pre-pandemic. And I think that really just goes to show you the state of the box office right now. We had a movie that opened at $150 million, and yet it still came in just below the pre-pandemic average at the box office, and that's because it was not a very deep bench. We had one movie making a lot of money, but all of the movies behind it weren't really making that much. We'll see if that bench can get a little bigger this upcoming weekend with Zootopia 2, with the second weekend of Wicked for Good. We're set up for a pretty good Thanksgiving week, but you never know what's going to happen until it all plays out. Dropping out of the top 10 this weekend, there were 3 movies. Chainsaw Man, the movie Arc is out after 4 weeks, which is a great run for an anime film. It and Demon Slayer really showed just how successful anime is becoming here in the United States this year. Begonia is out after 3 weeks in the top 10. It had 1 week in limited release, then 3 in the top 10. And Keeper from Osgood Perkins is out after just 1 week. It was the number 6 movie on last week's domestic box office charts. Looking at the biggest theater count changes for this past weekend, Die My Love out of theaters almost entirely after 2 weekends. It lost 1,279 theaters, remaining in only 158. Black Phone 2 lost about half of its theaters, 1,192 of them. It's still in 1,227. Sarah's Oil lost over 1,000 theaters. It's still in 1,347. Regretting You lost 955 theaters. It's in about 1,750. And Chainsaw Man, the movie Arc, lost 917 theaters. It's still in 503. Look for some big theater losses on next week's show, because if the multiplexes and the movie theaters around me are any indication, a lot of movies are going to get dumped to fit in every possible screening of Zootopia 2. These are the weekend's top per theater averages, and you know a movie's done well in wide release when it can open in over 4,000 theaters and still be number 1 on this list, because Wicked for Good brought in $35,724 per theater on average in each of its 4,115 theaters, so a lot of happy theater managers around the country. In second place was Cactus Pears, which brought in $11,500 in just one theater. Cactus Pears debuted at the Sundance Film Festival early this year. It won the Grand Jury Prize in the World Cinema category. It's about two gay men in India who fight society's rejection of them. In second place was a documentary called The Man Who Saves the World. I'm Ron Burgundy, which opened in one theater and brought in $7,180. It's a documentary about Patrick McCollum, a man who believes his destiny is to save the Amazon. In fourth place, also in one theater, is the documentary Cutting Through Rocks, which brought in just over $7,000. It is about an Iranian woman elected to office and her attempts to modernize her village. And then in fifth place is Sentimental Value, which upped its theater count to 123 theaters and brought in just over $4,000 per theater. Looking at the top films in limited release, Sentimental Value leads the way here with $616,000. Just behind was the special live presentation of the Metropolitan Opera's Arabella, which brought in just over $600,000 in 713 theaters. In third place, in an unknown number of theaters, and boy did I get a good number of corrections about this last week, it is DDPR 2, which brought in $189,000. I'm sure I still butchered it, but maybe not quite as bad. It Was Just an Accident stays on the list despite the theater count dropping to 72. It brought in $86,000. And Blue Moon's theater count dropped to 50, but it still brought in just over $42,000. This is a look at the fall holiday domestic chart. This is all movies released after Labor Day, and it was a big week of movement, largely because Wicked for Good enters the chart at number 2 with $147 million, only $30 million behind The Conjuring Last Rites for number 1. We'll see where Zootopia hits on this list, and if Wicked for Good will ever be able to actually grab that number 1 spot. Demon Slayer Infinity Castle moved down 1 spot to number 3. Predator Badlands moves up 2 spots to number 4. Black Phone 2 drops down 2 spots to number 5. Tron Ares also down 2 spots to number 6. One Battle After Another's down 2 spots to number 7. Regretting You stays where it is at number 8. Downton Abbey drops down 2 spots to number 9. Chainsaw Man the movie is down 1 spot to number 10. And The Long Walk drops off of the list altogether. And let's take a look at this week's Charts with Dan trivia question. We had Wicked for Good number 1 at the box office this past weekend. Since 2020, so this decade, how many musicals have opened at number 1 on their first weekend of theatrical release? And I know some people might say, well, wait, if it's its first weekend, then wouldn't it automatically mean it's its first weekend of theatrical release? Well, think about it, because that may have bearing on one of the answers. So I'll give you a second to think. And the answer, according to my count, and again, depending on how you define a musical, is 11. Encanto opened at number 1, as did Steven Spielberg's version of West Side Story. The Little Mermaid opened at number 1, as did Wonka, Mean Girls, and Joker Folie à Deux. It certainly didn't end at number 1, but it did open at number 1. Last Thanksgiving, Wicked and Moana 2 both opened at number 1. Then we had Snow White at number 1 this year. K-Pop Demon Hunters, that's why I specified first weekend of theatrical release, even though it was unofficial, was the number 1 movie in its opening weekend in theaters. And Wicked for Good rounds out the list. And this week's member poll question also concerns a big movie that's opening this weekend. Last year, Moana 2 opened on the Wednesday before Thanksgiving and still had one of the biggest 3-day opening weekends of all time for an animated film. Do you think that Zootopia 2 will repeat that feat with a Friday through Sunday gross above $135 million, which would make it one of the top 5 animated openings of all time? So that's really the question. Even though it opens on Wednesday, do you think Zootopia 2 will make over $135 million from Friday through Sunday and be one of the 5 best animated openings of all time? You can vote right now in the member poll on YouTube. I will reveal the results on next week's show. And if you're not a member, depending on how you're watching the show, there might be a button that says become a member right now, or there's definitely a link down in the description. Not only do you get to vote in the poll every single week here on Charts with Dan, but you also get early access to some of my videos, as well as custom badges and emoji to use down in the chat. So if you'd like to be a bigger part of the channel, go ahead, become a member. I'd love to have you. Let's look now at the international box office. This is all markets outside of the US and Canada. At number 1 was Wicked for Good, which opened with just over $76 million. Now You See Me, Now You Don't dropped about 40% from its international opening weekend to bring in $32.6 million. Demon Slayer Infinity Castle dropped 70.3% to bring in $15.9 million. If you'll remember last week, we talked about the fact that it had a big opening weekend in China. It had about a 70% drop off, and there are a couple reasons for that. Number one, it's not uncommon to see a big drop off in China from weekend number 1 to weekend number 2. And also, there's a political scandal in China regarding some comments made by Japan regarding Taiwan that caused the upcoming release of some Japanese films to be canceled in China. And there were reports that ticket sales for Demon Slayer also dropped heavily after that. So geopolitics is always a consideration when you're talking about Chinese box office. At number 4 is a film from Chinese director Bi Gan called Resurrection. It's a science fiction film, and I've actually heard some good things about this movie. And at number 5 is Predator Badlands, which dropped 55.3% for a $7.2 million weekend. When you take those international numbers, you combine them with our domestic grosses, we get the top 5 films worldwide, and no surprise here, Wicked for Good is number 1 with an opening weekend of just over $223 million worldwide. Not too shabby. Now You See Me, Now You Don't dropped 44.8% worldwide for a $41.5 million weekend. It's now at $146 million total. Demon Slayer Infinity Castle, as I mentioned, dropped 70.3%, finished at number 3. Its worldwide total, though, is now $757.9 million, so it's not hurting for box office gross. Resurrection's there at number 4 at $15.9 million, and Predator Badlands dropped 52.3% at number 5 for a $13.7 million weekend. Its worldwide gross now at $160.2 million. And looking at the top worldwide opening weekends for this year, Wicked for Good comes in at number 6. It actually comes in just behind Superman, only a couple $1 million behind Superman, about $7 million, $6 million ahead of the Fantastic Four First Steps. So Wicked for Good at the 2025 box office is in the same realm, in the same range as a Marvel or DC superhero movie. That's how well it's playing around the world, and honestly, how the superhero genre has fallen a bit as far as box office goes, especially this year. A Minecraft movie still with the best worldwide opening of the year at $313.4 million, followed by Lilo and Stitch, Nudja 2, and Jurassic World Rebirth. And looking at the franchise tracker for Predator, it's now only about $12 million behind Alien vs. Predator to become the highest grossing Predator film worldwide. So it looks like it is going to be able to achieve that mark both domestically and worldwide. The Predator falls to number 3 at $159.4 million. So Predator Badlands seeing some success, even though it is not the smash hit that perhaps Disney and Fox had hoped that it would be. Not the kind of breakout that they thought that the movie might be. Not a flop, not a runaway success either. So those are all the numbers I have at the box office. Very quickly, let's take a look at the latest in streaming, and we will start with the latest numbers from Netflix, which cover the week of November 10th through the 16th. At number 1 for a second week was Guillermo del Toro's Frankenstein, which brought in 24.2 million views in its second week of release. That's not a bad number. At number 2 was A Merry Little Xmas, which is a Netflix original Christmas film starring Alicia Silverstone. It brought in 12.8 million views. Plummeting all the way down to number 3 is K-Pop Demon Hunters. It still stays in the top 3. It is an incredible streak it's got going on. 11.58 million views. The Netflix original movie Mango comes in 4th with 10.75 million views. Then the Netflix animated original film In Your Dreams debuts at number 5 with 8.31 million views. At number 6 is As You Stood By with 7.8 million views. This is a series from South Korea about a deadly world where you have to kill to survive. At number 7 is the Netflix original series The Beast in Me with 6.88 million views, starring Claire Danes as a writer whose next-door neighbor, played by Matthew Rhys, is a suspected murderer. At number 8 is Last Samurai Standing Season 1 at 6.16 million views. This is a Japanese series about a high-stakes samurai competition. At number 9 is Dynamite Kiss, another Netflix original series, this one from South Korea, about a potential workplace romance. And rounding out the top 10 is the documentary Being Eddie, about Eddie Murphy. It brought in 5.65 million views. Let's take a look now at the latest numbers from Nielsen. Now, these are domestic numbers only. They're not global like the Netflix numbers, and they're delayed by about a month because that's how long it takes Nielsen to get them out to us. So this covers the week of October 20th through 26th, the week before Halloween. And these were the most watched streaming movies. At number 1 was The Perfect Neighbor at 16.8 million hours watched. In second place was the debut of A House of Dynamite from Kathryn Bigelow. It brought in 12.2 million hours watched. K-pop Demon Hunters also in the top 3 on this chart at 9.98 million hours watched. Weapons makes its debut, airing on HBO Max at 5.28 million hours watched. The Netflix original animated film The Twits debuts at number 5 at 4.5 million hours watched. Then we have Hocus Pocus, which invariably makes this chart every Halloween on Disney Plus at 3.8 million hours watched. Taken in Plain Sight and Don't Say a Word come in at numbers 7 and 8. At number 9 was the debut of this year's I Know What You Did Last Summer on Netflix at 3.18 million hours watched. And then another movie that you often see on this chart around Halloween, The Nightmare Before Christmas on Disney Plus at number 10 at 3.16 million hours watched. And we may very well see this again right around Christmas. These were the most watched streaming shows for the 20th through the 26th. The Diplomat is at number 1 at 20.58 million hours watched in its first full week of release for its new season. Nobody Wants This Season 2 debuts at number 2 on the list at just over 15 million hours watched. Then we have NCIS, Grey's Anatomy, and Law and Order rounding out the top 5. Bob's Burgers is at number 6. Poldark, which is a surprising random entry, stays in the top 10 at number 7. Bluey's at number 8. SpongeBob SquarePants is at number 9. And Gunsmoke rounds out the top 10. Gunsmoke is often among the most watched streaming shows. I don't know why specifically Gunsmoke, but a lot of people watching that old Western from the 50s and I believe the 60s. These were the most watched streaming shows when you look at it by watch time per available episode. So you take the number of hours watched divided by the number of episodes you can watch. That's how you get this number. Monster, the Ed Gein Story remains at number 1 with 1.19 million hours watched per episode. The Diplomat comes in at 935,000 hours per episode. Then we have Boots at 912,000 hours per episode. Nobody Wants This comes in at number 4. Ms. Rachel comes in at number 5. Tulsa King, as it continues its run, comes in at number 6. Poldark is at number 7. Stranger Things still on the chart. Again, this is from a month ago, but this is people that are catching up in anticipation of the new season, which debuts this week. Only Murders in the Building comes in at number 9 with 118,000 hours per episode. And Love is Blind rounds out the top 10 with just over 80,000 hours per episode. And those are all the numbers I've got for you this week. Before we go, though, there are a few things that are hitting theaters and streaming this upcoming week, this Thanksgiving week, that I think you might be interested in. First of all, today, a couple of recent releases that are available for premium video on demand and digital purchase. Regretting You is now available to watch at home, as is Bugonia. So if you missed either one of those theaters, they are now available to watch at home. Then tomorrow we have the big release of the weekend, which is Zootopia 2. It is in position to do monster business, both domestically and internationally. It's going to be the big story on the show next week. Also hitting wide release tomorrow is the latest from A24. It's called Eternity, and I've heard a lot of really good things about this movie. I'm going to try to catch it and see if I can maybe even get a review out this week. In limited release, as I mentioned in my review, is Wake Up Dead Man. Because of Netflix's theatrical window strategy, it's not going to be in very many theaters. The big chains are not carrying it. Strangely, if you live in a small town or have an independent theater or a small chain near you, you're more likely to have this movie because it's only being picked up by those smaller chains and independent theaters. But if it is in a theater near you, you can see it this weekend, and then it'll be available on Netflix in just over 2 weeks. Also entering limited release this weekend, a big Oscar hopeful, Hamnet, which many people are thinking is perhaps the front runner for Best Picture this year. It will start its rollout after a massively successful festival run this fall. The Secret Agent, a film from Brazil and another Oscar hopeful, is entering theaters in limited release this weekend. And then hitting Netflix tomorrow night, Wednesday, is Stranger Things Season 5. The first batch of new episodes of this final season will be available to watch at home. I will watch them as quickly as I can. I'm going to do a review as quickly as I can while also making time for Thanksgiving and family and those kinds of things. But you will see a review of that first batch of episodes here on the channel later this week. And that's everything I've got for you on this pre-Thanksgiving Thanksgiving edition of Charts with Dan. Thank you so much for watching this episode. If you're not subscribed, please hit that subscribe button, hit the bell, hit the thumbs up, share the video. YouTube's algorithms have changed. Videos don't go out the same way, so if you like what you see, I would appreciate you telling people that you enjoyed it and maybe tell them that they should watch it. But most of all, thank you for spending time with this episode. Stay tuned for much more this week. Until next time, stay safe, and I'll see you then. Bye.